And I am live. Conversations with myself. So I thought I would just do my first solo podcast. So I've seen lots of people do them by themselves. And I thought, well, we haven't done one. Episode number 75, New Year's Eve. Let's give it a go. What a year, eh? 2020. Um, and I just done some research, a little bit of a look back on the year. And I think it's been an incredible year well, obviously, COVID is the kind of headliner for 2020 for all the wrong reasons. And, we continue to see the difficulties with that and the lessons it brings, the learning it brings, the building of relationships that it brings. So many positives as well as the difficulties and the challenges that we're going to face for what is going to be, I think, a long time. Um, but let's just go back to the start of January, where people went into the new decade with full of optimism and hope, new big goals. What were they going to achieve for the next 10 years? Some people were looking at big goals for 2020 in itself, kickstarting. But looking back at they might have even been doing things like veganuary and major challenges, dropping alcohol for a month, full of hope. But at the same time, there was Australian bushfires going on, and I kind of forgot about that. I remember watching, friends and influencers such as James Smith posting about it on their stories, and massive donations going there to try and help the people that were suffering with losing their homes. And that seemed like along with the fires that later happened with, and the annual fires that seem to happen in America and the US, that our world was on fire. And that's horrific in its own right. That you know we're burning our own planet. It's because of the rise in heat that's causing this, the dryness in the ground. And I completely forgot about that. So much stuff's happened that being just a bit of research reminded me of that. That's how we started a year. Um, and kind of very quickly, COVID was happening. It was, I think, November 2019 when the first cases of COVID, or the unnamed virus, coming out of China. And I remember talking even in January, February. I guess there was lots of um, almost laughter from the Western world about how this had been developed in China, and oh my god, it's been eaten from a bat. And you're wrong, really, for us to think like that. But that's where it was. We were not even concerned about it, and all of a sudden, March comes around, and there's people in Europe, in Italy, suffering from this. And if you remember back to those times where the reports in the news, it was horrific. Um, the almost seeing that this town in northern Italy, and I've got a friend who's from northern Italy, very close to that. It was a horrible sight to see almost darkness fall on this town, and these towns in northern Italy. Seeing queues for funerals, and almost stacks of um you know people coming out of their homes in body bags. And you know that we realized then that it wasn't going to be long before the rest of the world were going to be impacted by this. For it quickly to arrive in the UK, working as normal, but not really working as normal. One eye on what was happening, fear of what was going to happen. Would we go into lockdown? Would we not? The rise in cases. Um, and then I was personally furloughed 1st of April, or 3rd of April, something like that. And that brings fear when that first happens. And I've been through redundancy um, several times. I think 11 times or so in my career. I've been through a restructure of an organization or redundancy. That's what happens when you work in sales, and you can become quite thick-skinned to it. But this new word of furlough, I work for an American business, so hearing that word was, that's going to happen in the US, furlough. But no, it is a term that is used in the UK, and I'd never heard of it in the UK because it's very rarely that we see redundancies, but we've never really seen furlough, this pause in work. And that was going to look like 0% pay, but the government, and I think a lot of us can be grateful that we live and work in a country which does look after its people. Um, I'm not going to get into on this episode of the podcast about um, opinions and should the government be doing this or not. But I do recognise that I'm entirely fortunate to have been born and live in this country when I could have been born and live somewhere else that didn't look after its people, or maybe looked after its people less. To be looked after with an 80% pay, although from my side it was a lot less than 80% pay, because if you work in sales, you do not work for a basic salary. You are incentivized and motivated and live on your commission. So 80% of a basic wage was an incredible cut, but really humbling in a way to have to tighten the belt. And my dad's got this phrase of living in old clothes and eating porridge, and that kind of felt like where I went was, okay, let's have the basics, live with the basics. But very fortunate again for that to have happened at the turn of the season, springtime, and going into summer, where May, when we go into full lockdown, but we can go out for a walk. And I'm part of the James Smith Academy, where we saw one of our podcast guests, Graham McKenzie, launched the Steps Challenge, and we've done an episode with him, and we also announced the winners live on the podcast. But with the Step Challenge and seeing people increase their steps significantly, you'll remember with another podcast guest, Katie Holly, where we had 20k a day, and that came off the back of other hashtags coming from 10k before 10 a.m. and just being able to walk and feeling a luxury from walking, being able to get out and see the city, the parks, the wildlife. And if we look at that as an advantage of COVID, the reduction in pollution and the increase in wildlife, was there more wildlife, or was it just because we're off we could see them, or because there was less cars that came closer to our homes? But these are the world's natural gifts, I guess, and we very rarely previously took a step back and appreciated those things. So I think we can be thankful for that. Remember the other things that have been taken away from us, feeling of our freedom being taken away. And you remember if you remember those cruise ships being docked off of shorelines because they had COVID on board and they weren't being allowed in. It was almost like a movie in a way of like prisoners on a ship, and you know, it must have felt like that for some of those people. Remember the hotels and the Canary Islands, and where people were locked in a hotel and they're almost hanging off the balconies. The scenes again in Italy where um that lots of people in inner cities are living in apartments and they're having parties on there and trying to keep spirits up. Um, but a freedom, feeling like a freedom has been taken away when that's almost a given in the UK. We've never really not in this lifetime anyway. I think some of our grandparents and those that lived through the wars will know what it's feeling like. The freedom has been taken away, but I don't. I don't know what that's like. I've got an idea now, but I still don't, because we still had some of our freedom. You were allowed out for your one walk a day, and that was rumored to be 1 hour a day, but it wasn't. That was misconception that came from, I guess, people's perception of prison, where you're allowed, your 1 hour a day of exercise. But you're allowed out for your one bit of exercise a day. Now, most people can only exercise for 1 hour normally, but a nice long walk and you're by yourself in the countryside, feeling the, as I look outside today and it seems quite nice and warm out there, but it's not. It's 1 degree. It's a nice bright sky. But remembering back to the 22 degrees and just being in that place was pretty special, really. So if we look back on that, I think that there's positives there. We're seeing now that living in tier systems in the UK or coming out of other lockdown periods, it's not so easy in the winter time. It's not easy when it doesn't get light to 8:30 in the morning and it gets dark at 4 o'clock in the evening. That makes it harder, and that's I think a tougher feeling, like our freedom has been taken away from us again. And I think we're fighting back a little bit on what the government are trying to do, when we need to live by what the government are telling us, whether they're making the right or wrong decisions. We've got a moral, um what's the right word, but that we've got a, we've got to do it for people. We've got to do it for the safety of people and safety of ourselves. And I think most of us understand that, and we see minority spoiling it for majority. That's been the case all my life. There's always the one kid in class who was causing a scene meant we all were kept back late, or there's one mistake from a footballer in a football team that causes the team to lose the game. It's always the minority that spoil it for the majority. But we need the majority to keep doing what they're doing. And again, I'm going to stay away from opinion, but with COVID, it's been an incredibly tough year, which we stick together, we keep going, and I guess we're going to live through. I remember saying in the summertime, as long as we can sit down together as a family, we'll be okay. That was taken away. In my head now, I'm thinking almost if I can get away on a holiday later on in the summer, we'll be okay. But I'm not banking on that. We've got to keep looking at the beauties of life in the small things. I remember when my mum was going through her illness and she was sat in our family conservatory and she was looking at flowers, and not just looking at, she was admiring the flowers and intensely looking at the flowers. And I said to my mum, "Are you okay?" She said, "Aren't these flowers beautiful? Look at them. Look at the detail. Look at how all the colors. Look at how I remember seeing these flowers a couple of weeks ago. They hadn't grown through, and she'd been watching these flowers almost on a daily basis and admiring the beauty of that, the life that flowers were bringing. And that's when things are taken away from you, and you look at the small beauties in life, and you realize that we're only ever all bunch of small organisms on this earth, and if we can't admire the beauty in the small things, then how can we admire the beauty in the bigger things as well? So I think we all need to just keep reminding ourselves of that and trying to find happiness in everything that we do, because that's what's going to keep us going. As I said, the majority do come together, and we've seen that this year with around COVID, people doing 5K for donate 5. People still trying to find ways to earn money for charity, and charities have been majorly hit this year with cancelling of events, and I've had events cancelled this year with triathlon and 2 races cancelled there, 1 big bike ride cancelled, 2 10Ks cancelled, and everybody's experienced those. But that's had an impact on our charities, and we need to try to, although it's harder with our own economy, our own financial problems, to try and keep looking at how we can give to charity. But I know for one what charities can give to people. My mother wouldn't have survived as long without the previous research from cancer research or from big cancer charities. She wouldn't have had the support had Maggie's centres not been there. And my dad wouldn't have some support from them as well, and finding a bit of peace in a difficult time. There's mental health charities which have supported me personally, that I know supported other men, and that was big prevalence late last year, was about getting men to talk, and I think that still exists, and I believe that we need to keep women talking about mental health. But charities have been majorly impacted, and we need to go into 2021, I think, to remember that we do need to give back, and if you can't give in money, try to give in time. It was great to see people get out clapping for the NHS. What impact does that have? Where is everybody doing it when it's now? We did it for 5 or 6 weeks. Are we doing it now? How are we supporting the NHS now? How are we thanking the nurses that are that are still run off their feet and giving everything to try and keep supporting the unwell? Whether and there's other diseases and other health impacts still there. Cancer still exists, heart disease still exists, obesity still exists, but we almost don't hear about any of that now. And we've got to keep, as a nation, as a world, remembering that these things are all still there, and we can all have a positive impact on these things. We saw people working from home and finding that, wow, I can do my day job, and don't tell the boss, but I can do my day job in 6 hours instead of 8 hours because I'm not distracted. We've saw Zoom daily user increase went up by 1,500%. We had Zoom quizzes, brought our families together, our friends together, and they might have been getting a bit, oh my god, another quiz. I realized that I'm terrible at quizzes. I never get the answers right. I think I know the answers, and I'm not entirely right. My general knowledge is poop, to say the least. But let's keep going in 2021 and keep remembering these things that worked, and maybe bring them back to play, and keep being inventive, and keep thinking about new ways that we can do things, and stay connected to friends and family. Even if we can't be together, how we can be together even when we're apart. And as I said, other things are still going on in the world. There is still war going on. War hasn't paused. We've not seen peace on the front line, and there was explosions in Beirut. There was Iran attacking US military bases. There's just been soldiers deployed to Africa. War still exists, and that's a horrible thing that we don't understand why we still have to go to war. Even when the world needs to come together, we're still war going on. So yeah, there's so much stuff, and I haven't even touched on Black Lives Matter. Um, it's not okay. It is not okay for racism from white people to black people to Asians to Muslims to Jewish, whatever your religious beliefs, whatever the color of your skin, whatever your disabilities are, whatever every person is a person, and it is not okay for one to think that they're more powerful than the other. Purely and simply, I saw a post, a tweet earlier this week about how racism on a goalkeeper is still going on, and there's been so much promotion around this, and yet it's still some people think it's okay for them to hate on another person. Not okay, not cool. Don't have a place in my life or any of my friends' lives. Um, we embrace other people, and you know, culture is improved by cultures coming together. I don't want to speak too much on it other than say it's not okay, and it's incredibly sad that it's still happening. I can't even begin to understand what that is like, to feel that I'm a victim of racism, that I'm a victim of disability. Even a victim of bad banter or people pushing their luck, thinking it's okay to have a jibe. Bullying. It's I was bullied as a kid at school. It's it's still haunting me now. Um, so I do boxing, and I've seen in a couple of sparrings of late, I've noticed that I am still cowering away when under attack. Um, and the mindset kicks in as well. The when I saw it on video, all I saw was the scared little boy that I was when I was bullied at school. Um, and to feel that that still exists at 36, going on 37, is a deep dark um, haunt, because I'm a 6'8" man, and to feel that way when you feel 2 foot nothing and um, unable to deal with this other than cower isn't a nice feeling, and that's something I'm going to deal with next year, something I'm going to try to overcome. Um, a friend told me that I need to speak kindly to that little boy, um, but that's what I'm experiencing there is 1% of what somebody might be feeling with your years of abuse or you know, I was speaking with a friend last night or the night before about, I remember witnessing a man beating up a woman in the middle of the high street probably 10 years ago, and myself and three or four other security guards jumping in and stopping it, but that woman probably went home to carry on with more abuse. How abuse happens on children, and it's just, there's so much wrong in how humans treat other people, um, and how that has a lasting impact on people, on their futures, on the rest of their families. Um, we've got to keep fighting and keep campaigning and keep talking about it to bring these things to light. Um, and one of the, in terms of bringing things to light, something I'm really thankful for from the podcast was, and I never anticipated these things happening, but when I started the podcast, I had no idea. It was never in a goal from the start of 2020 to launch a podcast. Just wasn't there. It happened because of COVID, and I was given the opportunity to, or the backing from James Smith to go and do it and work with his members. And I if I'm honest, thought that these members' stories were all about their weight loss until I started talking to some of our guests. And I knew my own journey was more about my mental health and my heart health um than that's what drove the weight loss. But when I spoke with Jack Foster, and that was episode number 5, um, when he started talking about binge eating, and I knew that eating disorders existed, but to hear a man talking about binge eating, um, and the feedback that came in off the back of that episode was astonishing. To hear people say, "I've experienced that too. Thank you for sharing that, Jack." For that to help other people, that gave me the confidence to be able to do my own episode. I'd been asked, early on, would I do my own story? And I hadn't really thought about it. But hearing Jack talk about it and relating to some of that stuff, I felt compelled to do it. And doing that was a massive turning point for me. Because I got some things off my chest. And if you have not listened to it, please, do go and listen to it. But I got some things off my chest that I wasn't able to. And I opened up about my use of cannabis to my dad through the podcast. I asked my dad to listen to the podcast so that he knew that I had where I'd been. And that was massive to be able to get that one secret away from me. And I remember writing, actually, and I haven't written this down, but I wrote this down when I was preparing for my podcast: no more lies. And I meant that about for myself: no more secrets, no more lies, is what I wrote. Um, and it felt like a massive, massive weight off my shoulders. And again, then that led to Katie Hawley getting in contact again, and she said that hearing my story had helped her to think about her story. And then she came on later to tell her story, having done a Facebook Live around her eating disorder. And I've had other people come to me and talk to me about eating disorders and mental health. And Paul Greenland came on and talked about mental health. Um, these are the journeys that I've loved helping these people tell their own journeys. I've loved being able to tell my story. And that for me is the beauty of this podcast. It's setting out with conversations, but I've loved how open people have been. Um, you know, Graham McKenzie talking about his battles with cancer and severe back pain, and these are incredibly inspiring stories, but they're also, although they're very individual stories, I think a lot of people share those same stories, and it helps them know that they're not in this battle, or they had been in that previous battle, that they're not alone. And yeah, not being the feeling of being alone is a dark, dark place. Um, and we all want to feel liked and feel part of something. So yeah, I'd like to thank all of my guests really that for sharing their stories, and there was something in every episode. Do I have my favorites? I guess my two favorites, my own personal ones. I think any of the journeys are equal. They are incredibly inspiring. They've got a real place in my heart. If I'm picking any of those out, I think it's wrong to do, because there's something in every single one. I'm really proud of the James Smith episode because it felt like a bit of a coup. It felt like I'd won. But it was also, I was talking to somebody I idolized and that I felt was a mentor without even being a mentor. I took stuff away from that episode, and I'm incredibly looking forward to hopefully getting them back for a second episode. That's one I'm really, proud of. One that I got so much out of and was excited about was a recent one with Andrew Davis. The one I probably most enjoyed doing was the lockdown level up, because we went live every day in November, or every day of the lockdown. We did 28 episodes in a row, and I realized I've got a lot to talk about. And so, the help from Danny with that one, the excitement from Danny joining in, bringing in some, friends to do an episode. One of those episodes was brilliant. I loved doing the lockdown level up. And those episodes have brought us to 12,500 listens over 75 episodes, which, thank you. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of hard work. 3 or 4 episodes a week sometimes. Incredibly exciting. I've realized I've got a passion for this. I'm gonna do more. I'm excited about what I'm doing. It led to me taking the leap of faith and launching my own business. From May till now, I've done that. I've built a website myself. I've launched. I've done additional episodes with like Melco Marketing, who are incredibly supportive to your people. They're colleague, clients of mine. I'm now working alongside a lot of people doing coaching, helping people to develop within themselves, their career, their business. I've got a real passion for that. I love it. Wouldn't have done that without having done the podcast first. Probably wouldn't have done it without COVID. It's something I've sat on and thought about for a long time. I wouldn't have done it without furlough. The podcast, another thing from the podcast was we actually had people saying, can you get X, Y, or Z on? Not James or any of the guests hopefully I've got lined up and planned for 2021, but for me to talk to people. I've had people come to me and say, I'd love to be on your podcast. I just never anticipated that we're going that way. It was never meant to go this far. It was all just a few beers and an idea and an email sent to James. So that would be one of my biggest lessons from this year is, just do it. If you've got an idea, just do it. Stop pissing around and not doing it. Just fucking do it, man. If it fails, it fails. Whatever it is, give it a go. You might find an absolute passion and true love for doing something that just spawns from having a few beers and having an idea. So yeah, the all of those episodes, I've loved doing every single one, and I will continue to do some in 2021. Who do I want? Paul Mort, Lucy Lords, Jay Alderton, Carrie Green. I want to get James back on. I want to do more stories within the JSA. I want to take it. I want to interview boxers. I want to interview triathletes. I definitely want to maybe do some more challenge and group episodes. I'm doing my first one now by myself, so hopefully I'll do some more by myself when I've got an opinion on something or got something to say. I'd like to bring some people on who have got amazing stories from other places, like developing their mindset or growing their own businesses. I want to inspire and be inspired through the podcast. That's my aim. I'd want to just have loads of cool conversations. I want to have conversations with businesses. Will I be just as busy next year? Absolutely. Let's do it. Let's. What's the number? We did 75 in 7 months. So can I do 365? Probably too many, but we can do a load of podcasts, and I just hope that everybody keeps listening. And if you've got requests, if you want particular people, if you want me to go and try and nail down a different cartel, or if you want me to go and I don't know, Boris, why not? You might be looking to build his profile, but if you've got ideas, DM me. So I've been incredibly quiet on socials coming towards the end of this year. I took some time off because it's hard work, but also I realized I needed a strategy. And that's something I've learned from all of the podcasts and all of the people is with no strategy, with no plan, you're not going there. You're not going anywhere. Or you're going to lose your way. So yeah, I've took some time out just to have a bit of docking in time, some time for me and my family, but also so I could come back with a real strategy, cohesiveness, not trying to run over 4 different social media accounts, and being able to fit that in with all the other stuff I'm doing is, social media is a big part of it. So yeah, so I just took some time out, and it's felt quite nice. I have been using one platform, and that I've never really got into, and I'm kind of liking it. Been using Twitter. I think you'll see a bit more from me on Twitter. So if you are a Twitter user, go and follow any of they're all the same names. Or the podcast is actually chats with, I think, rather than conversations with. But you'll find me. I'm out there. So if you are a Twitter user, go and give me a follow on Twitter. So yeah, social media. I've got so much written down on this notebook because unbelievable. This just what happened this year. Like I said, we did the lockdown, level up, second lockdown. There's been a whole lot of people coming out with, they don't believe in the COVID, or they think there's a bigger thing going on, or there's anti-vaxxers, and not going to talk about that because it'll drive opinion anyway. Something that seems so long ago. I ran 100 kilometers in 6 days. And I've spoken about that a few times. It's never really landed about what I achieved for myself. 23 stone-ish probably now after Christmas. And 6 months ago, start of July, I ran 100 kilometers in 6 days. And I did it thinking it would be this massive epiphany at the end of, and it wasn't. It was the biggest anticlimax of my year. That it felt like I was going to be this. I don't know, just what I expected, a stadium to run into for the 60,000 people all cheering my name, and there was a couple of people there, a couple of people support from the JSA, from my friends within the JSA. What a community! Of you most of my listeners are JSA members, and you guys rock. Like, there's so many. Even back to January, James Smith book tour. How did I forget the drunkenness that happened on that night? That's probably why I forget. But the JSA people, you guys, you're there you're everywhere I look, and that community is quite special to me. And if those that are listening are not part of it, I'd only say join. I think you get a lot out of it. I think, what else has happened? No Christmas, that was taken away. No triathlons, mentioned that. World Mental Health Day, I thought that was quite powerful this year. I saw a lot of stories on Instagram of people telling their own stories, and that really fits in with the purpose of the podcast. I learned a few things from that. I learned how I remember reading a story from somebody who was telling about their mental health when they went to university, a time that should be incredibly exciting and full of opportunity. I didn't really anticipate that being a time where people might struggle with their mental health, and there was other, just different um, battles that people face. That sometimes, a lot of times, mental health, people think it's, to one person it's, the end of the world, and to the next person it's has no significance whatsoever and seems so little. And I think that's why it takes a lot of understanding. Um, it takes a lot for people to understand. Um, I think it relates to the phrase that a peanut to some is a snack, to others it's a death sentence. You have to try and have some understanding. What if somebody says they're struggling? They are struggling. If somebody looks like they're struggling, they're struggling. Just because you don't think they should be struggling doesn't mean that they're not. Um, and we should just all have a little bit more understanding of that and try to support. If you're not struggling, maybe you can help, maybe you can't, but try and understand. There's what else I've written down here. I'm just kind of rambling on now. I thought we was quite structured for a while. So what I'd say, I'm just going to try to wrap up now. Really, um, massive win for me this year is doing cold showers. I've done them every day probably since the start of November. Massive win, massive help to control or to understand my anxiety. Where is my anxiety before I get in the shower? Where is it when I'm in the shower? And where is it after I'm in the shower? I definitely recommend doing cold showers. I've written a daily email since the 2nd of August to my subscribers. That's where you get first exclusives to the podcast. You can, I'd love to sign up because I think if you like the podcast, you'll like my emails. I just try to write a story every day, and I'm going to try to get you to come and do some coaching with me. Probably, absolutely, but not every day. And I'm always trying to give you some free stuff on there. But yeah, I like telling stories. Now, I was at school was never a writer, and I was never a reader. In fact, I hated English to a core. I hated it. I now read every single day for enjoyment, not because I'm told to, but because I enjoy it. I read a lot of personal development. I read a lot of different things, and I write. I write every day in my email. I write blog posts. Um, I write a bit on social media. I am a writer. I've never thought of me being a writer, and I have a plan to write a book. I'd like to write a book in 2021. But if you want some of that free advice, um, just go to my website, personalaccountabilitycoach.co.uk/FDE. It's not the point of the podcast or anything, but I just think it's something I'm incredibly proud of in 2021. And I enjoy reading other people's, like James Smith's, um, every day where there's a story, where so I always take something away from those, and I hope that my subscribers take something away from them as well, because I do try to put a lot of effort in to that, and it's just writing. And I'd recommend it to people to go and do, because it's helped with my own daily thoughts. I guess it helps me get some stuff out, and actually sometimes I walk away with learnings because I start with an idea or a concept, and I end up Googling something and then doing some research over something before I come back and finish. So I always end up learning something. And if I'm learning something, I know that, if one other person can learn something from each email, I'd be incredibly satisfied with that. So if you want to do that, please join me there. And if you are listening, can I ask just, and I know I've put it on the end of every episode where James did a little outro for me, and I've added that in. But what I'd love is to share the podcast with more people. I want more people to hear it because I think there's some value in the podcast. So if you would, please share it. Show me your love with a few likes. Tag me in some posts. I'd really appreciate that. But we are on iTunes, and it does help if people are listening on iTunes that they write us a review. And we are putting lots of the podcast live on Facebook, and I haven't done that today. I was going to. Shit, never mind. But you can also write a review on our Facebook page at Conversations with PAC, and that really helps. Nice to see what people really think about it. So I'd appreciate that. Like I said, I put a lot of effort into this, and I do it for the listeners, and I set out with the goal of, if one person listens and that helps one person to go and lose some weight or improve their fitness or performance or mental health, I've done my job. Like I said, 12,500 listens across the episodes. That tells me that people are listening. So I'd appreciate a little bit of that back with some reviews, comments, shares, and I will be eternally grateful. But then that, it leaves me to say Happy New Year. Here's to 2021, and we will be back. Thank you, and enjoy your parties.